Have to jump up.
I know you by name. No, it's just.
Pardon? Go ahead.
Victoria Chavez, El Paso County.
Joe, PPACG engineer.
Thank you.
John McGinn, JDS Hydro.
Welcome back.
AJ Anderson, concerned citizen.
Thank you. Great. Thank you all for coming.
You missed
You're getting
They're
the
hiding
rest
behind
of
a
them?
pole.
Pardon?
Yeah, this is Scott Bowles, PPACG. Peter Gillespie, PPACG.
Thank you all for coming. Is there somebody else back there?
Yeah,
Craig's
Craig.
hiding in the back.
Craig's hiding.
Okay. All right. We agreed to go to some consent items that include both the agenda as well as the minutes. Is there anything that need to be pulled out of the consent agenda? Okay, can I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, then we will follow the plan. I understand we have a public comment. Victoria?
Said I beat him to it, so. Hi, Victoria Chavez, El Paso County. We are working on our new transportation plan for the county, unincorporated county, although we consider all the other cities and the incorporated areas, but it is for the unincorporated county. So I wanted to come and tell you that we're doing that and hand out a little flyer. And I'll start those around, let's see. Some this way. And you can take these flyers, keep them, frame them, put them on your wall, or better yet, take them somewhere in your neighborhood and put them up for me. Take it to, one of your convenience stores, your local library, a town hall, grocery store, whatever. If you could take it somewhere and post it so that other people can learn about the plan, really appreciate that. And we also have a website. It's ecroadplan.com. And on there right now is a survey that you can go and fill out. And right now what we're asking for is people's thoughts on their goals for our transportation system. The surveys will change as we move along throughout the year. And we'll be asking, probably next survey will be, where do we need improvements and where do you see road needs? And to help you to give me some feedback, I've brought some little survey cards. And they are already postage marked, so you just have to drop it into a local mailbox. So if you would like to fill one of these out and drop it off, or again, if you've already filled out the survey online, Rachel, you've got one already. So if you've filled one out already, then take and hand this one over to your neighbor and ask them to fill it out and drop it in their mailbox and send it back. So we're really interested in getting your thoughts and your feedback from all across the county, and we hope you visit our website and visit it often, as it will be changing as we go along. And we hope that you take a few minutes to look at our current plan and to tell us what you think about it, and work with you over this next year. Our plan is to have this next plan completed and updated by December of 2016. So that's sort of our quick schedule. Any questions I can answer for you? Sir.
We just completed a 5-year update of our PPACG regional plan, and now we're starting into another process, which is a somewhat less area, but still a major transportation plan.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a way, as we go forward on these things, that we can be more coordinated, and maybe instead of having to fill out 3 different kinds of responses, maybe we could do one?
Well, here's what I'm going to tell you about that. We really do these plans for different reasons. PPACG, as our MPO, has a certain federal mandate to do a plan in a specific way. And they're looking at how do we utilize our federal funds that come through the gas tax into the area and divide that money up. What we are looking at in El Paso County is not just what are the important projects that we're going to apply for federal money, but what are the other projects that we could use for future PPRTA. A lot of our RTA projects we pulled off of our last major transportation corridor plan. We also used the plan to take a look at grant opportunities and say, hey, this grant opportunity came up, this road fits that need, let's apply for that. The other thing we use our transportation plan for is when development comes in and they're going to be putting a lot of trips on a certain road. And if it's one of our major roads, we use that plan to say, okay, we need to have some improvements on there that are paid for by development because you're putting a lot of impact on that road. So we have a completely different purpose for our plan than the PPACG plan. Where we do coordinate, and actually we tend to like to follow them a little bit, is we utilize the data and the model that comes from the PPACG plan, and we adapt it for the county. So that is why I make you do this after you've already done it, and I'm sorry, I'm going to keep making you do it. But we do coordinate as best we can, but we do have really different reasons for doing plans.
And some of the, add a little bit to that. We have to do the whole NHS system, which includes all the principal arterials, and we have to do anything regionally significant, which is adding 1 lane mile of new capacity. So if they're talking about new capacity at all, it has to go through our stuff too. So.
And I even look at gravel roads, where Craig does not care about my gravel roads.
Not even a little.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you for participating. Oh, wait, you got one more over here.
Is it possible to get 10 or 15 more of these? And
I
where?
can-
Oh, come on.
Yes, I will bring them to you in a second.
I've already
Thank
filled
you.
it out online.
Great. Craig?
I have an item. A week ago today, the Transportation Commission started talking about Senate Bill 228 funds for new projects. So this sort of popped up at the last minute. And last Thursday at the TAC meeting, the TAC had a discussion about how do we make sure that the priority project list that our board approved, if you remember going through the priority process, CDOT's list, again, is different than our list, even though they updated it. The good news is they are in the process of revising the revised list again. What they did is they took one of the projects off the list that we had taken off the list, which was, I can't read it, US 24 8th Street interchange. So they are recommending that project come off of their priority project list. And in its place, they are adding 3 projects, I-25 widening South Academy to Circle, US 24 West 8th Street to 31st, and US 24 East Garrett Road to Stapleton Road. What's happening is that the new forecasts for Senate Bill 228 money are coming in, showing that there is actually likely to be money, $200 million in 2016 and this year, and $106 million in 2017. So there's real money. Last week at the commission meeting, they said, well, the first $200 million will just stick on the I-70 project, which I think is kind of funny because I-70 still doesn't have its NEPA clearance, but they're heck bent on getting that project done. The next $106 million, they are trying to figure out how to divide those projects out, and that will come out of this list. So we talked to TAC, and we're in the process of working with CDOT to get these up, but I wanted to give you a heads up that that is something that is likely to be coming up again.
Great.
I'm sorry, I was fuzzed out. Where's the money coming from?
General fund spillover. The general fund tax revenues are coming in higher than expected, but not high enough to trigger a Tabor refund. And so there's about a little over $300 million likely to come.
Thank you.
So, any other questions? Thank you.
That's good news. Okay, thanks, Craig. All right, February 10th Board of Directors report. Jacqueline was gracious enough to give me some notes, actually the draft minutes from that meeting, but I also had some things that I wanted to mention that occurred, that I actually heard that were very specific. CDOT, in related to Craig's statement, had mentioned the lack of funding that was going to be available in our area for hardly any more projects, given the Cimarron project, but more funds would be available July 2016, the 2020 funds. So Craig bears good news. There was a timeline on the I-25 expansion study, which everybody has mentioned in this meeting. And apparently it's going to be, once the original study is done, it'd take about 2 years, but the full plan would take up to 3 to 4 years. So it's not likely we're going to see that anytime soon. One of the things that they did mention, though, because, when we have accidents on I-25, especially close to home, it seems like Greenland gets their fair share, which means Palmer Lake becomes alternate I-25. And they are looking at accident mitigation for Palmer Lake because of the amount of, I don't know what the attraction is in that particular spot, whether it's a curve or what the issue is, but they are going to look at what the potential Plan Bs will be on the short term. They also mentioned that, FYI, there will be temporary structures as work continues on Cimarron over Fountain Creek. And they were checking on the I-70 chains rule for passenger cars, because I think there was some confusion as to that, even within the group that was at the meeting. Legislation, you're going to talk about the legislative. Rachel do the legislative updates. There were some really interesting points made on some of those bills. And then the military updates, which I know this group has expressed interest in, is I did let them know that our group is interested in the joint land use study and having some kind of voice in that. And I did hear that military updates, that at Fort Carson, the generals are actually are rotating every 6 months. The command is rotating every 6 months, so that there's active generals that are deployed will also be back here for 6 months. So occasionally you'll see a change of faces. The plan is for about 20,000 soldiers. I think at its height we were about at 26. There is a combat aviation group that is deployed right now, and more will leave in the spring. And it appears there are less Fed money for, contracts like construction contracts, that kind of thing, which is not a surprise right now. At Peterson, they will be doing a community celebration for 9/11, which will be great. 15th of April, there will be a 50th anniversary of Cheyenne Mountain. At the Academy, the 12th of March, there will be a ceremony talk on the state of the base. And then at Schriever, one of the things that they were looking at, there's a huge safety concern, 94. My husband drives out to Schriever every day, so it is hazardous. But one of the things they were looking at, and mentioned with Brian as well, is looking into a feasibility study with Mountain Metro Transit, and maybe going from the Space Village out to Schriever to reduce the amount of traffic that's on that road. And apparently there used to be some kind of van service, so they're looking at what the possibilities are for something like that happening again. And then we had a few minutes chat about area agency on aging, and not really too many issues there. They were going through some Medicare enrollment issues that they were going to resolve. And other than that, it was a pretty efficient meeting. So, any questions? Okay, thank you. Okay, the Sterling Ranch Lift Station site application. Steve? Okay. Jacqueline, did you get that? Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
My name is Peter Gillespie. I'm the new kid on the block. I took the position vacated by Rich of happy memory. So anyway, today before us is a request for the board to consider, to review, and recommend for approval a lift station at Sterling Ranch on Volmer Road. I understand that the Water Quality Management Committee originally looked at this in the fall, I think October, didn't have a quorum, so they put it off till they did, and they met in January and approved it. Of course, it's before you today. The receiving entity, the Cherokee Metropolitan District, has approved it, and I think you have that documentation before you. There was a little snafu last month, I think a financial matter that I understand has been straightened out to everyone's satisfaction. But as I understand it, this project meets the, it's gone through due process PPACG, and it meets the regionalization and consolidation criteria. So as far as we see, this project merits your review and recommendation for approval. The facility engineer, JDS Hydro, can speak to any technical questions that you may have.
We are going to have a discussion, but I would like to have a motion.
Move
one way or the
approval.
other. Pardon me?
Move approval.
Second.
Okay. All right, let's open it up for discussion because this was a pretty lively subject, and we actually tabled it prior to the Water Quality Committee. Bob?
What is Cherokee's role in this? Who is the overseer of such a project?
Well, ultimately, it's Cherokee. They operate the wastewater treatment system at the end of the line, so they'll be receiving and treating the sewage.
Cherokee has had its moments in the news from time to time. And is anybody overseeing Cherokee? aside
Beyond my
from their
purview.
management?
I don't know the answer to that question.
Other questions, discussion? Oh, sure, you're welcome.
I might be able to help answer the question. This facility, the collection facility, would be the Sterling Ranch Metropolitan District's responsibility, and then Cherokee is the regional wastewater treatment entity who has a 4.6 million gallon a day brand-new plant in eastern El Paso County. The entity that oversees both of these, including these systems, the discharge permits for these, the final applications and so forth, is Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment. So that is the watchdog agency over any wastewater entity, be it Colorado Springs Utilities or any of these specific districts. So they do have a regulatory agency that takes monthly, weekly, and almost daily reporting from them.
Thank you.
Other questions? Go ahead.
Is the financial situation that's described in the packet today, is that the only reason that it's been delayed for 60 days or a little longer since we looked at this last fall?
My understanding is yes.
Okay.
Am I correct that the original reason that Cherokee withdrew its acceptance of this was strictly financial? Is that the only thing that changed?
My understanding is yes.
Is there anybody that can say, yes, that was the only reason?
Yes, that was the only reason.
You have a little bit more information, sir? Keeps the concerns.
I'm PJ Anderson. I'm here on behalf of Sterling Ranch Metropolitan District Number 1, which is the applicant for the site after the lift station. The Sterling Ranch Metropolitan District has an intergovernmental agreement with Meridian Service Metropolitan District. Meridian Service Metropolitan District owns 46% of the plant, of the Cherokee Meridian plant out by Schriever Air Force Base. Cherokee owns 54%. Cherokee is the operator of that plant, but our agreement is with, Sterling Ranch's agreement is with Meridian Metropolitan District. The intergovernmental agreement, which we negotiated about a year and a half ago, had a provision in it that the site application, or excuse me, the first will serve letter required a $500,000 deposit or a payment to Meridian. We, on Sterling Ranch's side, we had intended that to mean the first will serve letter for a final plat. Meridian said, no, we're signing off as a will serve on the site application, so you owe us $500,000 now. And legally, they were probably right. We came to an agreement, and they've been paid, and that was what the issue was over. So it's been paid. Everybody's happy, and from now on, Sterling Ranch Metropolitan District has an obligation to buy X number of taps each year. There's a continuing obligations. They have a number of pre-treatment regulations. Sterling Ranch has to adopt the same wastewater regulations of both Meridian Metropolitan District and Cherokee Metropolitan District you have. Probably more than you want to know. I mean, there's no, what do you call them, John? There's a number of things that, what's the word I'm trying to think of? The treatment at the sink, the water softeners.
Yeah, there's several requirements of Cherokee for their plant. They're the operator of the plant, so they're the ones that probably is most affected by this. But their pretreatment requirements are for the purpose of limiting any kind of commercial or industrial flows, although this facility or this Sterling is almost exclusively domestic, so most of the flows are not going to be associated with that. But they want to control TDS, total dissolved solids, as well as grease, oil, and a few other things. Those are primarily commercial elements as opposed to domestic. So,
my point is that Sterling Ranch is being overseen by Meridian Ranch and Cherokee, who are in turn being overseen by the State Health Department. So there's plenty of checks and balances. There's daily monitoring, and all that's going to be happening. So,
Bob?
Does the city of Colorado Springs have an interest in what we're talking about vis-a-vis any effluent or flow out of that going into the Fountain Creek drainage?
no. The flow from Cherokee's plant goes to the Upper Black Squirrel and to the Chico Basin and completely bypasses the Fountain watershed. The Chico, ultimately, it's an intermittent stream, but ultimately it flows directly to the Arkansas itself, down below Pueblo. And CSU was declined service to the area, so they're pretty much said
Thank you.
nothing.
thanks, Jim.
Raised his hand at one point.
So,
Okay.
so we have had a buy-off by the Water Quality Management Committee, which are the technical experts of PPACG, and we're a citizen group looking at this. I'm not sure, so we're not looking at the technical aspect of it. We're looking at, because we're not technical experts in this stuff. That's correct, right? So now we know what a lift station is, all that kind of stuff. So anyway, I'm not sure specifically what we would be looking for unless somebody has some objection to it. I just want to point out here, too, that we had talked about the bylaws before. PPACG is the lead water quality management planning agency for El Paso, Teller, and Park counties. So we have a jurisdiction over the three counties that PPACG is involved with in this one element here. So anyway, I'm just not sure what our questions might be if they're not technical.
I think there was a lot of concern last time, but you want to go ahead, Rachel?
That's a good question, Vince, and in this case, what the CAC should be looking at is whether the process that was followed was the correct process. Were all the proper stakeholders included?
And do we have a list of those so that we could make sure that they have done that, or?
No.
Okay.
To some extent, it's up to you to determine if you see any that were missed.
I think you do have that listing in the site application. There's a whole list in the document that was submitted to you of the various approvals and groups that are involved in this. It goes up the chain of ladders, so I could regurgitate those. It's fairly numerous, but there is a lot of folks at a lot of levels technically that get involved in water
And the
quality.
Water Quality Management Committee also looked at these too, I'm sure. Okay.
Alan, did you have a pertinent question?
Got it, Angie, I know.
Great. Any other, Hal?
One, I guess, clarification. The last time this was brought up, there was a lot of discussion about kind of the description and the technical, but at the end of the day, because it had not been approved by the Water Quality Committee, we said,
We
nope,
tabled it.
we're not going to go there just yet, even though it was asked for us. One question, was there any discussion during the design and/or approval process for the opportunity to reuse some of this effluent for landscape irrigation, recycle water, things of that nature, Was there discussion about that, or was it an obligation that it goes back to the aquifer, whatever the term should be?
The answer to the first part of your question, was there discussion and consideration? The answer to that is yes. But of one of the criteria, one of the policies of not only come from EPA, but filtered down through the 208 committee is what we call regionalization. And what that policy states essentially, I'll put this in my own words, is they do not want to proliferate small wastewater treatment plants in areas where small plants might not do as good a job as a larger regional facility, such as the 4.6 Cherokee, million-gallon-a-day Cherokee plant. So you have a little bit of give and push there. When you do reuse, you have to get it to a point that you're coming out of a regional plant that has reuse capabilities. Now, the Cherokee plant does recycle or recharge to some extent to the black squirrel, because its primary discharge is not to surface water, but through what we call rapid infiltration beds or RIBs, in which the wastewater effluent is treated and then delivered back to the groundwater for augmentation and recharge. So it is an indirect form of reuse, not a direct, where we're putting a little treatment plant on the site and then pumping it back on the grass. So yes is the first answer, and it is being performed, but not quite to the extent that you were referring to there, but in more of a recharge manner.
Because my memory of the original discussion, there was a study phase 1, study phase 2, and there was a list of potentials, and then out of that came the design of the plant. And one of those was reuse, recycle, something. So, now that you have mentioned it, I recall that discussion. I just didn't know if there was anything in the design. It sounds like no, really.
No, because you remember, a lift station is only moving raw wastewater, so we'd have to go to a wastewater plant.
Got it. Okay. My mistake.
And I might follow up on that a little bit. The Cherokee Meridian plant will be recharging infiltration of tertiary treated water into the ground, and it's in the works now. Our agreement allows us to get a pro rata water back the same amount that Cherokee gets back and Meridian Ranch gets back. Sterling Ranch's water is not going to be Black Squirrel water. It's coming from out of the Black Squirrel Basin. It's going to be going into the Black Squirrel Basin. We have the right contractually to bring that water out of the Black Squirrel Basin back to us. And so there's some challenges between the Black Squirrel Designated Groundwater Basin folks and Cherokee, and they've been fighting for years over recharge issues, and those haven't been resolved. There's some water court cases that are going to have to be resolved before we know exactly how much water we're going to be able to get back. But that's the hope.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes.
So, anyone can correct me if I'm remembering incorrectly, so it's been several months. So I think one of the issues was the funding, and there was some issue of defaulting, and then what happens, the lender defaults or so forth, and who is responsible. So that has all been resolved, I guess, is what we're understanding today, that all the financial backups, and so that the burden of after the lift station is, is in the design process and constructed, that it's not going to be burden of our PPACG community, but rather the developer. Is that what I'm understanding?
I wasn't here at the prior meeting, but I was described to me. The funding is in place. There's two main sources of funding for the Sterling Ranch project. The Sterling Ranch Metropolitan District has issued bonds. They're going to be paying for roads, stormwater, parks. There's private funding in place, which is a condition precedent of the bond issue of the district to pay for the water and sewer system. So it's private money being spent on the water and sewer side of things, public money, if you will, being spent on the roads and stormwater and park side of things. But the funds are in place, and there's a number of obligations to make sure they stay in place. So.
Okay, that's great. And then I think someone mentioned CSU has declined to provide service in this area. So if this does not go through, then
CSU, as you probably all know, refuses to provide water outside the city limits. Been a longstanding policy of theirs, right or wrong. And they refused to annex this property because there wasn't enough commercial in it for them. They didn't want the residential. So that's That's the way it works.
reality.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you both.
One more,
Alan?
if I may. Is there do you have a time when this lift station will likely be not big enough or have enough capacity? And all the other elements in this whole system, is there a time when we're going to face more issues?
The pipeline is designed for the ultimate need of the entire service area, because we obviously don't want to go out and dig up 3 miles of, road again, so forth. The wet well and the dry well, which are two of the big elements in the lift station, are sized for the ultimate. The auxiliary tanks and the EQ system and the pumps are sized for the first 1,100 people. And the reason that we downsize the certain portions of the equipment is that when you have those low flows, we have to manage those with a like piece of equipment. The other thing is that those types of equipment have a life of between 7 and 14 years. So we're going to be replacing that equipment anyway due to mechanical life. So you tend to size certain portions of this for the ultimate, but then certain equipping situations you size for a portion of the life, and then you expand that as you go.
But that's the only critical
The equipment,
element in
the
this whole thing.
equipment and the auxiliary tanks, and probably the electrical equipment. A lot of the things that have depreciable lives that are a lot less than 20 years are what we size down now, and then we'll size up as we go. It uses a lot less power to it.
Okay. I think we've learned more about lift stations than the average community person, but I want to thank you for addressing a lot of the questions that existed, and I appreciate
It does
it.
run uphill.
He's been dying to say that.
Thank you. Okay. Does everybody understand the issue at hand? Okay, all those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, thank you very much. Thanks again for coming. Okay, number 6, TIP policy, projects funded with emergency relief funding. Craig?
Good afternoon, Craig Casper, Transportation Director, PPACG. We talked about this as an information item last month, and that is that right now there is no way for us to put emergency relief funding directly into the TIP. It has to go through the whole committee process, the CAC, the TAC, and the board, which takes about a month. Emergency relief funds have to go through a pretty extensive vetting process at the state and federal level before funds can be awarded anyway. So the proper role of PPACG in the case of emergency relief funds is to act as a rubber stamp. Talked about it at the TAC, and Federal Highway pointed out, the very last sentence, what we wanted to add to the policy, originally read, funding from the Federal Highway Administration classified as emergency relief can be added to the Transportation Improvement Program as an administrative modification. Federal Highway pointed out that a portion of emergency relief funds actually comes from the Federal Emergency Management Administration, FEMA. So they suggested funding from federal agencies be classified, that is classified as emergency relief, can be added. In talking to CDOT, then put in, well, there's possibility of some state emergency relief funds also. So what the TAC approved last Thursday was, and I quote, funding from state and federal agencies classified as emergency relief can be added to the Transportation Improvement Program as an administrative modification. So that is what TAC's recommendation to the board is. So I wanted to bring that to your attention.
Craig, I had one question. Thank you. That's Ashley's question. That's all right. We'll go to the, is there a motion?
So moved.
Second, what are you proving? What are you moving?
That we approve the motion,
The
or the
TAC
proposal,
language?
sorry.
The TAC language that was given to us.
Yes.
Okay, I second that.
The amended. Okay, I do have a question regarding, how will the CAC learn about which projects have been proposed for emergency relief funding?
Proposed? I'm not sure because we don't find out which projects have been proposed for emergency relief. We only find out which ones were selected.
And then how will we hear about ones that are selected? Only because I think part of the community will be
Yeah,
interested.
all of our administrative modifications come through as information items. So they go to you, to the TAC, and to the board as an information item, which lets the board, if they really don't like, what got approved, they can back out of it. But so we bring it all through as an information item.
So we will have knowledge of it.
Yep.
We just won't have to.
Right. It'll just happen. We aim for 24 hours after getting notification, so.
Thank you. Al?
Are we considering approval of the amendment that,
The amended,
as amended, right?
As amended by the TAC.
As amended by the TAC.
okay. Any other questions on this issue?
Should these information items be put like on a consent calendar where we can just read them, or do we need to go through the briefing of them? What do you?
They're usually a 3-minute item. It is usually separate, where we come up and talk about it, so we can point out where the project is and what the project, what the plan for it is. They're usually pretty short items. I mean, we can move them to consent if you'd like, but it's usually such a short item that.
And I guess personally, I think just being able to ask questions about details so we can relate the piece of information to the community might be helpful. If we find it is cumbersome, we can always move it to consent if it becomes something that we don't want to deal with. Okay, sound good?
Mm-hmm. Any other
Okay, all
questions?
those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, item number 7, 2017-2022 Transportation Improvement Program applications, the consistency with the RTP. Hi, Scott.
Good afternoon, everybody. Scott Phillips, Pikes Peak Area Council of Governments, Transportation Planner. The item before you is a quick discussion item regarding the 2017 through 2022 TIP applications and the consistency with the RTP, the 2040 RTP. We received 19 applications for the TIP process they were actually for the programming years of 20 through 22, so those 3 years. There were a few inconsistencies, and a couple projects were submitted that were not originally or not existing in the 2040 RTP. And part of this is just to notify everybody that should those projects be selected, there may be an additional process that will require amending the LRTP, the RTP, to incorporate those projects into that document. Part of that process will also be to balance the books, to balance the physically constrained portion of that of the RTP, which will be switching out projects and or reducing some project costs to incorporate the additional projects to accommodate the costs associated with those. It can be done back to back with the adoption of the TIP. That's coming right down the corner. And again, this is just something just to let everybody know that should those projects be selected, there may be an additional process that in accordance with the requirements to make sure the RTP and the TIP are maintain their financial constraints. And with that, I also have a handout for everybody. And this is an initial. This is not the final. It's just an initial. This is the listing of the project submittals with a brief description, funding request, sponsor, and also the scores that we have initially provided for them. And then scoring has been done in-house by staff here. So I'll pass that out. And along with that, we have a location map that identifies the locations of all the projects. Now, the projects are identified A through S, and on the map, you have A through S. There were 2 studies that were submitted, our planning studies. Those are located out here. They don't mean any. We just put them on a spot on the map, just for identification. So, pass that around. And with that, if you have any questions,
Go ahead, Michelle.
So we just went through this onerous process to make
Sure.
an RTP.
And now we've got people that are saying, that's nice, but I also want all this other stuff. It almost sounds like these are projects that they couldn't get approved into the RTP, so they're trying to backdoor the process. But, you know, obviously you have no insight into whether or not that's what's going on.
Sure.
But more importantly to me, what's the point of the RTP if we are just going to have people submit willy-nilly whatever the heck they want today, even though we just asked them to tell me what you want for the next 20, 40 years?
Sure.
Can I answer that?
Yes, please.
As one of those entities that submitted projects willy-nilly.
Thank you.
We submitted 2 projects that are not included in the long-range plan because the road that we submitted them for at the time was outside of the MPO area.
Okay.
Since then, the road has been put inside the MPO area, reclassified so that it is now eligible for federal funds, and therefore we submitted it.
Okay.
So that was Charter Oak Ranch Road. It's a big project that Fort Carson is really interested in, but it was going through that process, so it wasn't technically eligible early on, but later on it became eligible.
Okay.
So that was one reason why we submit them willy-nilly.
And I mean, I understand
He's
there's
holding
going
on
to
to
be
him over
cases
here.
where there's valid needs like that, you know, kind of happen. But it's just frustrating that, you know, you spend the time, and we've coordinated with the community too on the RTP. So now we're going to have an amendment that comes through that really the community doesn't get to participate in that process.
Well, they still will have the public comment period for the tip selection when that goes through. So there still is an opportunity for the public to go, oh, I see that project. I have more questions. I want to tell you what I think about it or whatever. So there is that 30-day process that's still available for them. But we also have things that just come up. You know, you have a major accident and it highlights a potential safety issue that could be fixed with an engineering solution that you weren't looking at before the accident occurred. There are those kinds of things that come up too. A couple of the other things that we applied for were things that came out of the floods and the fires, which were not issues before, but are issues now. Because we had this really heavy rain period where we, I want to say it was last year in like March through June or something like that, where we had a national emergency. We were declared a national emergency. So there could be things that come out of that that have arisen because there's been a completely new environmental issue to deal with.
Absolutely, but all 19 projects?
Oh, no, I don't think there are 19 of them, no.
No, not all 19. There were several, just a handful, I believe. I think there were
Okay,
like 3.
I'm sorry.
The other inconsistencies may have been that funding requests may have been higher than they originally were, and/or there may be scope changes to the project that differs from what originally was submitted for the RTP. Again, this is just to give everybody a heads up that should these projects be selected, if they're not in there, there will be an additional element that takes place, which would be amending the LRTP.
Horse trading.
Yeah, essentially that's it. I just want to give everybody a heads up, make sure everybody's on.
The way I remember the discussion when we talked about it, I think the last meeting too, was that all 19 that came in for the tip
Sure.
were brand new, weren't related to the RTP at all, so
No.
that was.
No, these are the majority of them are all related to RTP, but there were a few, like I said, this is just to give everybody a heads up in case they are selected, not that they have been or will be, but in case they are selected, there may be an additional process that goes concurrently with the adoption of the tip, which will be in late May, early June.
I think one of the things that occurs is that, and I had took the exact opposite post. I said, I guess it's a result of if new projects are better ideas or more cost-effective solutions to the problems that have been pointed out. I would hope that if we had a project 4 years ago and all of a sudden we've got a better idea or a wiser technology or a different issue now,
Right.
take the opportunity to update it, upgrade it, that kind of thing. On the
Agreed, it
flip
just sounded
side
like
is-
these were all new projects that,
All right.
hadn't
I
been part of the
agree.
RTP, and that was my concern.
Yep. Jim?
Question and comment. When you go out with your request for projects, and I assume that's, that's not the question. That's the
Sure.
lead-in part, and there's a comma. Is the RTP available to the people that are considered? So they have some idea of what criteria, this is kind of.
Yeah, yes, and we don't have a policy or a requirement that projects submitted for the TIP necessarily be in the RTP. So that's not a policy that is currently exists at this time.
Okay, and my comment is, and I think Victoria did an excellent job of explaining why we had at least two things from El Paso County. I think it's going to be important for us going forward that when these come in that are not aligned with RTP yet, we have to be talking about an amendment. We need as much information as we can about the rationale behind it. Expanded, emergency related to weather or whatever, but something that really gives us more background other than El Paso County submitted this request for these projects, period, and we're in favor of it, kind of deal. Okay?
Understood, thank you.
Mr. Baker?
Scott,
Yeah.
I'm missing the terminology of 0 plus 1 versus 0 minus 0.5, the ratio of how we approve. Remember when we looked at the extension of Powers Boulevard to the interstate, that ratio, what was it called?
Cost benefit?
Cost benefit.
The cost-benefit ratio. That is not on here. Has that been accomplished at this point in time for these projects?
Cost effectiveness is on there, Bob.
Third column that's the language that was cost effectiveness that's used.
Yeah, but those numbers are completely.
That's not the cost-benefit ratio, I think, that he's trying to talk about.
Cost-benefit. I mean, that would probably be something in Jim's talking that would be very important on these projects.
Well, I would agree. If something is brought forward that has a higher cost-benefit ratio, that would certainly, to replace something or whatever, I would agree with that.
Well, that was the criteria that we used in the.
In the plan, yeah. Because some of the projects are very small, it's really difficult to give an actual cost benefit. A cost benefit is in pure dollars. There's this many dollars of benefit. Usually it's travel time savings, crash savings, vehicle operating cost savings, and emission savings are the four benefits you can get from a transportation project that you can monetize. And then you have the cost to build, operate, and maintain a road as the cost. For simplicity's sake, what we went with this time is you take the total score that a project gets and divide it by the total cost. So it's actually possible for a project in our system to get, 17 as a cost effectiveness score, which would be really good, and still have a negative or a less than 1 benefit cost ratio. And it's just purely because the resources needed to do an actual benefit cost analysis are pretty tough to come by when you're talking about really small projects. If you want to, we can make a note that next time you'd like us to do, because we can do, by and large, a lot of projects as a benefit cost analysis. It's just difficult.
What's a really small project, Craig?
Adding bus shelters and ramps around on a mountain metro plan. So they score pretty well, but the benefit cost ratio of that is pretty tough to calculate.
And I guess one of the things that, if we're going to go with one of the newer projects or advocate for one of the newer projects as opposed to one of the other approved projects, just because of the rationale, I guess it looks like you're going to be comparing apples and oranges then if you don't have the same, because we saw the cost benefit on the formally approved projects.
Right.
But if these don't have the same kind of evaluation, how would we weigh the two against each other?
It is difficult. What we could do, like I said, with the small projects is there's only a couple, 2 or 3 large projects that were submitted, 2 of them on Academy Boulevard, and they actually scored pretty well. Those type of projects are much easier to do a benefit cost ratio than the small projects. It's also tough to do benefit cost ratio of like, there was a mitigation project submitted that's a good project, but, how do you monetize the value of wetlands and wetlands banking or stream reconstruction? How do you monetize value of stream reconstruction? So those are tough, but we could start separating projects and into more like types. We've moved away from that. We go through waves, and we used to separate. Okay, there's this, this scoring criteria for this scoring criteria for this scoring criteria for this, and everybody, and this. Now we're in the lump it all together and do one criteria. But we can break the microphone. We can separate it back out.
I guess as a committee member, it's nice to know that you're comparing apples to oranges like that, that you're going to be able to introduce the project and say this is not one that there is an adequate methodology to do a cost-benefit analysis because of the size of the project. So,
Yep. And so
I'm
what?
not looking for something like that, because I did take a lot of that into consideration when I was weighting projects.
And for any project that's adding capacity, adding lanes, those are the ones that are easiest to do benefit cost ratio on. Also, just pure maintenance projects, you can do a life cycle maintenance cost and get a pretty good idea on those. When you start doing other things that especially are more social or qualitative benefits, those are the tough ones.
Any other questions?
What was the driver for PPACG to call for projects?
We have to have a
Is that defined, kind of what was?
In the federal regulations, we have to have a 4-year list of projects. Our 2016 to 2019 tip is our 4-year, but July 1st, the state enters fiscal year 2017. So then we'd actually be in 2017 to 2019, and that's a 3-year tip. So we have to adopt our tip by July 1st, a new tip to add the next year. We're going to add 3 years, looks like right now, so that we don't have to do a call for projects for a couple more years.
Because, I mean, when I look at the list, South Academy Boulevard was on the original RTP, correct?
Yep.
This is in addition to what's there?
Well, no, this is
modification of, or?
Yeah, this is implementation. The tip is supposed to implement the plan. So what we're doing when you see the project that's in the plan and then you see it in the tip, it's real easy for us to say, one of the things we have to do when we get certified is say, how are you implementing your long-range plan? And we can say, well, look, same project. Makes it real easy for us.
Good. Thank you.
You
Which
mentioned
projects were not part of the RTP? Do you know which ones they were?
I don't off the
Or
top
are-
of my head.
Okay.
So.
Was it 2 Charter Oak Road, the bridge?
The
and
Charter Oak,
itself?
right.
Well, some of that you get into, for maintenance, what was used as how you judged your maintenance needs. And so with maintenance, it's tough to really say. We'd have to go through a process of that as well.
One of the things you had was public comment, because these are new projects, per se,
I don't
or
remember
new
you
additions of
asked.
projects. The 30-day window, when does that 30-day window for public comment end?
It will end 30 days after the board releases it for public comment. So if they release it, I forget, it's like, no, I think they're going to release it April 18th. They'll approve it May 17th, which gives up 30 days. Or we'll go through the comment period in May, and then they'll get approved June 8th.
Okay, so that public comment open time is between April and May.
Right now, that's what it looks like, yeah, but it'll be 30, the board, whenever the board releases it, and I hope next month you are releasing the tip for public, you're recommending the board release the tip for public comment.
Any other comments, questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Scott, this is awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
really, really helpful.
I will relate, John upstairs put it
Thank
together
you.
for us, and I'll let him know that you guys appreciate it.
Okay, I want to skip that.
8.
Item number 9. Are we back on 8? Yes, we are. Back on 8. Fiscal year 2016-19 tip, amendment number 14.
And again, this is just an information item. This was an administrative amendment to add the downtown transit station relocation study funding. This was a roll forward from the previous tip. It wasn't rolled forward when the tip was initially adopted. We received the request last month, and this has been executed, added to the tip, and I believe you guys are already moving forward with the study, so everything's underway. This is to let you know that these funds have been added to the tip, and that the study is underway now. No action, nothing more.
I was just curious, why wasn't it carried?
My understanding is that when the tip was initially adopted, there was a miscommunication that local agencies and PPRTA did not communicate to carry over these projects. So there have been a number of rollover projects that we've dealt with over the past year. This is another one of those, and it's been added to the tip. And again, MMT has moved forward with the project. They've been given their approvals, and just to let you know, it's been added to the tip. That's it.
Thank you. Okay, any questions about this one? Okay.
Thank you.
Number 9, thanks, Scott. Subcommittee for bylaws. We actually had 2 meetings, and I'll just bring up a couple of things, at least from the process, and then let any of the other committee members feel free to join in. You know, we actually went to the PPACG board and we asked them, we actually, part of the process is that we need to request that we're going to review our bylaws and why we're going to review our bylaws. And in that statement, I said we had some questions and concerns about membership terms, diversity in the community on our group, and appropriate training and education, and then there were some concern about officers related to the terms. So we actually met twice. Smaller group the first meeting, larger group the second meeting. Great participation in the second meeting. Thanks everybody for being there. We reviewed, went over, Vince actually graciously went through the entire document and did a blow-by-blow through everything that we might have questions about or that we had concerns about. We had discussed the officer terms. We actually discussed, when you can nominate somebody, when it was appropriate. We discussed membership terms. We even went through discussing the possibility of making all the terms begin and end at the same time. We also had some discussion about the mission and some entertaining ideas. We went through about how to look for further growth and representation, what kind of path we wanted to go on down the road. One of the things we forgot to take into account that Jacqueline reminded us of is that it isn't, sometimes it's not all about us. Sometimes it's about how the staff supports us and what it takes for those member governments to find appropriate people to serve in the roles that we serve in. And I think we underestimated the work that is done on the staff side as far as communication, letters, interviews, that kind of the work that goes into bringing a new member on board. One of the things we also discussed and that people shouldn't be concerned about is as you near your end of your first term, unless you have really been a total pain and not showing up for meetings and not participating and not representing those that help bring you to the table, there's really no reason to not allow you unless you are not interested and the member government or organization is not interested in letting you continue. There's no reason that you can't just immediately, with notification, fall into your second term. So don't panic if you're coming near the end of your first term. The other piece of that is when we discussed officers, people running for officers. If it looks like you're going to come near the end of your first term, it's almost a non-issue to be able to continue into your second term with your officer commitment. So that shouldn't ever be an issue. The other thing that we brought up related to that, and we discussed, was the fact that if there's some weird reason that you're going to finish your second term and you just happen to be second vice chair, we really have the opportunity, and I don't believe we'd have any kickback from the board, to be able to say, we'd like to extend, for instance, Tamara's, her term in order to be able to complete this last year of service as an officer. There's no reason we really can't do that. And so what we all talked about was we're advocating for common sense and respect for somebody's work on this committee. So we're headed down that path. And Vince, Michelle, Jim, you have things you want to add?
I guess when you look at bylaws, I did some reading on that, and they say that you should err on the side of being stricter than looser. With this group, we could be looser. Things work pretty good, but there may be another group that comes in 2 years or 3 years where you need to really have something where you have the I's dotted, the T's crossed, and everything taken into place so that there's no question. So, it's just a different philosophy of how you might want to look at it. I think the next year we could probably get by with our bylaws the way they are, but I think we need to consider the stricter side versus the looser side in the bylaws. Maybe next year if we review it again, or the year after that. Then there's the, we haven't gotten permission from the board to adopt the philosophy of, you're going to get extended another 3 years or whatever. Basically, we're looking for forgiveness as opposed to permission to do something like that. And I think maybe we ought to ask somebody, if this is the right approach to do it. And maybe they'll say, yeah, that's fine.
My understanding on that one was that the CAC was going to propose that as a bylaw change. Is that incorrect?
No.
I didn't think we made it as a bylaw change. I think we just discussed it. And then after information from both you and Jacqueline, it was, I don't know that anybody's ever heard of somebody's that's been said, no, you can't serve your second term. If the member government or the member organization says, at this point in time, because of the way the jobs are, and I'll just take into account the discussion, well, the Business Alliance changed their participating member in our group because it was maybe a better job fit, or maybe it was better representation for them, or maybe it was a change in position of the former member. So that's always a possibility, and that's really up to them. But we could do that. We didn't do that. We didn't make a recommendation.
Well, I'm just trying to understand what you're saying. Vince, when you say we would ask for forgiveness rather than permission.
Well, the thing is, it's not specified in our bylaws that this is what you can do. The term expires. Boom. But if we're saying that we can slide into the second term and it's going to be okay, we're agreeing to it here, then I think what we're doing, if somebody were to question it, well, what are you doing? Why did you do that?
I'm not following. I'm sorry.
Well, I guess
slide into the second term?
Yeah, I don't believe it's slide into the second term. I think one of the things we have to do is, for instance, I serve for El Paso County, to represent El Paso County. So what I did when I said I would like to serve a second term is that I worked through Jacqueline and Rachel, and I said, what's the appropriate way to find out if El Paso County will allow me to serve a second term? They let the El Paso County group know that, and about, I'd say about a month and a half later, I got a letter from El Paso County, we're happy to have you serve another term. So it isn't a slide-in. I think you have to go to those that you
There's a
represent.
vote.
Pardon?
Yeah.
There's a vote.
Yeah.
There is a process.
Yeah.
You have to go to the member government or the organization that you represent and ask for approval to do your second term.
But I guess the whole part of this is that we're talking about November. We have a person, the term expires in May, and we're saying, okay, we're going to go ahead and allow you to be the chair, the first vice chair, the second vice chair, on the assumption that this is going to happen. You're going to be approved for the second term because nobody's disapproved.
Well, no, I think what they're saying, at least my understanding, is that if someone wants to run as an officer, even though their term expires, say, in May, they're saying, I'm going to serve, and I'd like to continue my second term. I'll start the process to get approval, and if it's not, then I'll leave in May and we'll vote on a new chair.
Right.
I mean,
Group
to
has
me,
to-
that's the way it would work.
I guess the other question that I heard, though, Jen, was, let's say there's a person that is completing their second term,
Right.
and the person is a whiz kid, and you'd like to have them serve, say, as chairman. That would be an exception that I think would really take some action and explanation to the board.
Right, right. It does. It requires action, but what I guess I'm saying is that it's not an insurmountable action that is anti or against our bylaws. It does, the terms are explicit. What we would need to do is, if we would like for that person to serve, and we feel very comfortable and confident about that, is to go to the board and say, we would like to do this. Now, I can raise that with the board now as a potential opportunity and see if they have any issues with that, if you'd like. I don't think that's...
The term whiz kid made no reference to Courtney.
Actually, I was going to say,
One token millennial comment.
I was just going to say, I looked around the room, and except for a couple of three exceptions, there's not a kid anywhere.
Oh, that's just a matter of how things...
It's all in your head, Jim.
And I don't think it's something that, you discuss in front of the entire board. I think it would be the chair of the board or...
I think we might be talking about two different things here. If I understand correctly, Vince, you're talking about your concern that if you wanted to nominate someone for an officer position at the end of the year whose term would expire in May, you see that there may be some issues there, and how do we deal with that? And I think that, Jen, you may be talking about the idea that was discussed that if someone were term limited, that we would ask the board to extend the term temporarily.
There are two things, two separate things.
It's two things, but a very similar issue. The one has to do if somebody's in between terms and going to fall into their second term, there's a process to go ahead and get a second term. That already exists. That process exists, and there's nothing wrong with asking for that in advance. We usually have at least, the nominating committee usually has a month, sometimes two, to get ready for a slate of officers. So there's not an issue with that one. I think we can always ask.
Well, one thing
If
we
the
also
person's
talked
gonna
about was, the termination of the terms. And Jacqueline said before she got here, actually it was all, people would, they would say, I don't want to be part of this anymore. And then they would start their term at that point. And they staggered all over the board, all during the year. And then Jason, as you recall, was able to kind of bring these together into two groups. One is May 31st and the other is November 30th. And one discussion was, well, let's either make them all November 30th, extend them, or extend them again and make them all May the 31st. And we had a discussion on that, too. If they were all expiring at the same time, we wouldn't be talking about issue number 1 and number 2, because it would be taken care of. Everybody's term would, your term of board leadership would start either
December.
May the 31st or June 1st, and it would go through the whole year, or it would start on, I don't know, January 1st. Your term expires November 30th. How do you take it through
December.
January?
Well, I think it would logically go to the December meeting.
Yeah.
Which oftentimes is problematic.
Yeah.
Because there are times when we have not met in December.
Yeah.
So,
So anyway, that was the discussion. We just move them all, and then that's where staff time came up. It's real hard to do all of this at one time during the year, all of these changes. But
I think we're making an argument, to come back to where you started, Vince, I think we're making an argument for not having the bylaws too detailed, mainly because we can't anticipate all of the situations. We can sit here and, well, what if Al wants to be king of the mountain for 6 months, and then he's done, and how would we handle that? Well, we can't get to all of those kinds of things. And to the extent, one of the things that we did talk about, well, Maybe he does, I don't know. I can't read his mind, thank heaven. One of the things we talked about doing was changing our annual voting meeting from December to either November or May to coincide with one of the expiration dates where we're seeing that. And that is one thing that I think is very much worth considering and incorporating that into the bylaws. I think that's a fair thing. But ultimately, one of our challenges is we are not an independent entity. We are a creature of PPACG board. What we're asked to do, that was one of the discussions that we got into, what we are asked to do is work on things that are of interest to the PPACG board and bring our perspective within the range of what we have, which is a citizen's perspective as opposed to technical, something that you brought up earlier. And I think that's something that's important for us to realize is our bylaws really ought to be fairly general, in my view, ought to be fairly general because we're really simply responding more than we are generating or initiating action. And so that's kind of the position that I've been trying to articulate in the committee.
I think one of the things we talked about is like you could come up with probably a dozen what-ifs with regard to our terms, with regards to chairs and officer commitments, that kind of stuff. We are occasionally going to run into terms of people that just need to get off. They're going to move, any kind of things. It was not ever going to be perfect because we as people who serve don't follow. Things happen, and so we just have to adjust. I think if we have something that is against our bylaws as we go forward and it comes up, then I think that the board is sufficiently well-versed and comfortable with us coming forward and saying, in this circumstance, we would like to, with your approval, do X. And I don't see anything, I didn't see anything in the bylaws that would prevent our ability to be able to go to the board and ask for, I don't know if I would call it special dispensation, but the permission to go forward with that alteration. It doesn't have to be an all or none for the rest of forever. It can be just for that particular circumstance.
That's right.
We did have great discussions about the mission. We did have great discussions about, how our role is generated. We can't just decide we're going to get into all these things unless PPACG recommends that we get otherwise involved, or we'd go to them and say we would like to be more involved in X. We talked about having the bulk of our items be mostly transportation. But indeed, that's what we do.
Whoa, his brain just exploded.
Let me add on to the mission as well. It's kind of interesting. We did talk about, the way our CAC is set up is based on the MPO. I heard that one time. And then I wanted to bring up that point today about the water quality areas, that we are responsible for El Paso, Teller, and Park counties. It was right in our discussion thing today, and I pointed that out. So, we are narrow in transportation. We're very broad when it comes to the water quality issues, and others are in between. We don't have any responsibility for aging in Park County, is what I understood. So we do in Teller and El Paso County. So we have a little here, a little there. What is kind of interesting, I was reading through our requirements here. One item it says maintain good communications with PPACG board as necessary. I've been here almost 2 years and I have not talked to a PPACG board member, nor have they attended our meeting. It would be kind of cool, maybe.
True.
Who?
Rob McDonald, right?
No, he's
But
executive
he's the
director.
executive director.
He's a non-voting member of the board, though.
But he's part of the board.
Well, I'm thinking of
And
the
then-
chair or the vice chair coming down here and just shooting the breeze with us, telling us how they feel our mission is, and maybe
You got
twice
to
a
realize
year.
those are elected officials, and they have a full plate of stuff. But
Twice a year.
we go to their meetings, and
And
both
that
Kevin
didn't
and
go
Jim
on.
and Bob. I mean, anybody on this group is welcome to go, or if we want to
Yeah,
raise
you
something.
are. But that reporting line, when I first came on, that wasn't in existence. it was formalized before I was chair of this group, that we would go and report our activities. And sometimes it's kind of, you wonder why you're there, because Jacqueline gives them an excellent written report that is in their agenda packet. But you're there in case you want to emphasize something where there was broad discussion here and maybe some disagreement.
Right. And I know we have done that with.
Allow them to ask questions of us, and that Jen will come back and report the board activities, which is kind of the turnaround, because what we do is report to the board. They pass the action that the TAC and we have approved, and so it's kind of brings closure to the things that we've done. But for a while, that really wasn't there. Jacqueline was always there.
I think it would help twice a year to have them come down and spend 10, 15 minutes and tell us what they expect of us. We work for them.
I think that's fair, and I'll go ahead and raise that, if you like it, the next one.
You know what would really be interesting is to have a person like Nolan Schreiner, who is now on the STAC board. Well, no, it's not the STAC. He's on the Transportation Board,
Yeah.
State of Colorado. And that would give you a different perspective than CDOT coming and talking to us, you know. And it'd be El Paso County talking to us, or Region 2. So that would be interesting also.
Anything you all have interest in that is related to our job, if you have specific people or specific interests, let us know, and we'll go find out about it. Yes. Forgive me, I need to, Kevin was.
That's all right. I just wanted to know, is your subcommittee going to make a recommendation to this committee?
If we were
about
going to.
Specific things, and when might we expect to see that?
What we decided at the end of the meeting was that it didn't appear that there were, right then, that there were specific things that needed to be changed in the bylaws.
Okay.
If we felt like specific issues needed to be changed, the meeting was very broad and then narrowed down on the things that we had raised with PPACG about looking at those particular issues. I think there are not specifics yet that we're going to recommend for change yet. So there's nothing to vote on yet.
I think Jim was putting together some, putting some commas and
Yeah, I did the same
apostrophes.
thing and gave them to Rachel and Jacqueline. We have
So you had some grammatical stuff that you.
I've been remiss.
Yes, how?
It was discussed, but only a little bit. I personally would value another discussion at some point about our mission. That's come up in the past. We've voiced frustration sometimes. We know we spend most of our time on here. But are there other things that we, as the Citizen Advisory, the Community Advisory Committee, would like to make our mission? We've gone all the way to we should give our input on everything, to are there a few things we should add to our, to our agenda periodically. I think that's a discussion that should not be every meeting, but it's worthwhile. I think it's very worthwhile. And if there were 5 people or more who kind of sit down and kind of beat this around a little bit, I would get value from hearing a synopsis of that discussion. Maybe not today, but I think it'd be valuable. That's my statement.
So for the nominee for would-be King of the Mountain, part of the letter that you wrote, Jen, was it discusses that there was a training and education, and I don't. For me, as one example is when I arrived to the CAC. It took months before I had a clue as to what
Longer
we were
than
even
months for
thinking
me.
about.
We've
And I
talked
voted yes if Jim did or Bob voted. I was willing to accept that, or someone that knew what they were talking about. And I would like to, once we establish what the mission is, I think we should roll back and do some sort of formalized education so that they get a video presentation of X number of about various things, and then you can't vote until you've been through that. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yes, I do.
And then you feel like, know what CAC means, at least to that point, and then you become an associate member. I would like to see that happen.
Okay. And I think in a former couple of year, formerly, some of us did have that training because we requested it. That should really be part of the process when somebody comes on.
Yes.
I agree.
And if they come on at about the same time, it would be sort of easy to get 2 or 3, 4 people, and then we're not wasting the time of the staff. Most of this doesn't have to be a live staff member talking to them, but a little bit. Rob, let it say, hi, welcome, this is our mission, we need you.
Yep.
Some committees have education subcommittees, and they make sure that the group is educated on the stuff that they need to. Of course, they would get the staff to come in and provide that, but they would kind of ensure that all of the elements are taken care of and everybody gets the education that they do need. But that would be a standing committee.
I'm a huge supporter of board and committee training and education, but I don't think it's a bylaw issue. I think that's a policy issue, and we could determine that if we want to elaborate and build a policy book, and I'm not sure that I have the appetite for that. I think that idea is excellent, and I support it wholeheartedly. I just don't know what the best way is to get there for the CAC.
I think what I'd really like to do, with your permission, is go ahead and take some of these ideas that you all have raised today and perhaps discuss them with the board and say, these are things that we're interested in doing and we'd like to follow this path. With your approval, we'd like to follow this path and see what we can establish to make us a more effective group.
Jim, just one more thing. I'd like not to lose what Jacqueline said. She's at a point where, let's use as an example, Green Mountain Falls. And we have a vacancy for the Green Mountain Falls representative to this committee. And they may take a long time to come up with that person. And when they finally do come up with it, and it goes to a board for approval, it may be very inconsistent with our schedule of electing a member to this board, our terms. And that's another thing you're going to have to deal with, because that person, instead of May or November, may come on in September or something like that. It's just, and it's not necessarily our fault, Jacqueline's fault, but more its home is Green Mountain Falls. And I just use that as an example.
Like I said, it's not a perfect thing. We're all volunteers. We all are trying to serve our community and do what's best. And I think sometimes it's just not going to fall into the appropriate box. And if we have somebody willing to serve and get information back and bring us information about their particular group that they represent, geez, bring it on. I think it's a great opportunity. But I'll go ahead and take some of these issues and ask if we can move forward with potential discussion about these issues, and then we'll try and find the right framework to do that. Okay, Jacqueline?
Then as part of this discussion, can you, well, I guess we had it on the agenda as discussion and not review and recommend.
No, you do.
Okay. Formally approve the members of the subcommittee. Are you going to continue to meet? What are you doing as you go forward to the board?
I think I'm going to take the ideas that people raised today to the board to let them know that these are things that the committee raised in response to our discussion about the bylaws.
Okay.
And we'd like to continue our discussion on these particular elements.
They might have term limited it themselves.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Perfect.
Thanks.
You could include the names of the committee. I know.
Okay.
Rachel.
All right. Let's
Twice now.
let Rachel go over the legislative tracking items, and they were really interesting when I was listening to the PPACG meeting. So
I'm glad you thought so. I'm just going to pull up our latest legislation tracker, and I'll go over the status of the bills that we've taken positions on, as well as a couple of other key bills. And then if there's any others that you want to talk about, we can do that. We're kind of at a lull right now in between two periods when we see a lot of new bills introduced. So this will be pretty quick. First bill on our list here is House Bill 1018. This is the one that stipulates that the State Transportation Advisory Committee, of which one of our board members, Commissioner Norm Steen, is our representative. Craig Casper, our transportation director, serves as an alternate. That the input of that group would be delivered directly to the Transportation Commission, who makes the decisions, in addition to CDOT staff. And that one is moving right along. It went through the House, and it went through the Senate. So the next step is that it will, in theory, be signed into law if the governor agrees. The next one on the list here is House 1031. This is the bill that proposes to study the makeup of the Transportation Commission, whether the current makeup of the districts is appropriate, or if districts maybe should be added or changed. The Legislative Legal Services Group that works for the state legislature would do that study, and they would consider changes in things like lane miles and other relevant data population, and then make some recommendations and include some alternatives. So that one has gone from the House Committee on Transportation and Energy over to the Appropriations Committee to determine what the fiscal impact would be. The next one here is the military installation, considering those needs in the statewide transportation plan process. That one's been assigned to committee, but hasn't been assigned a hearing date yet. The bill about RTAs having the option to go to the voters for a mill levy, House 1067, has passed the House and been introduced at the Senate. It does not yet have a hearing date either. And then this is a new one. I don't remember now. I apologize if we've talked about this one since it was introduced or not. Craig sort of referred to this funding formula earlier. If there is excess revenue in the state budget over and above what was budgeted, a certain amount must be transferred to the Highway Users Trust Fund, unless there's so much extra money that we trigger a Tabor refund situation. What this bill proposes is that for every year that the transfer is not made, there would be an extra year added to the window of time that that could happen, so that a full 5 years of transfers is possible. Clear as mud?
Yes.
It's on the Kill Committee.
Yes, so the board has voted to support this bill, but as Kevin pointed out, it is assigned to what's known as the Kill Committee. It was introduced last session as well and didn't get anywhere, so it's unlikely to proceed, but we'll follow it and see what happens. This is one that we talked about that would change the fees assessed on motor vehicles that are too heavy for the roads that they're on. And I know we had some discussion about that. That one the board is opposing, and it is in committee but doesn't have a hearing date.
Why are they opposing?
The concern is that those funds really serve as a disincentive to have too much weight on the roads. That puts extra wear and tear on the roads. And if the fees are merely a slap on the wrist, it's no longer an incentive to behave yourself. That one largely came out of concerns voiced by the TAC.
Isn't that the bill that's related to like 700,000 that we receive?
No.
No, that's another bill.
That
Sorry.
is this one here, Senate Bill 1611. That is the one that would repeal the requirement that some faster fees are transferred to transit projects. That, and you're right, that is $700,000 in local impact. But that bill, which this group opposed, in addition to the TAC and Colorado Municipal League and Colorado counties and the Transit Association, and a long list of others, was killed in committee. And it's interesting to note that it was largely a party line vote, with the exception of Representative Terry Carver, who has been here at PPACG on numerous occasions. She's asked for a lot of input from staff here, from county staff. She's come to board meeting and been very involved in gathering local feedback. And so a number of us wrote to her with concerns about this bill and the board's formal opposition. And I think that because of that, those relationships, she really took that input to heart, and that was the reason that she broke with her party and voted to kill this bill.
That's the reason why it's in red?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, it's in red because the board opposed it, and then we have this
That's what I meant.
dumping ground at the end here where we put bills that have had some resolution, so it's down there.
Because motorcycle lane splitting is one of the stupidest things.
Well, then you'll be happy to hear that that one also died in committee.
Oh, good. Yes, it is.
I ride a motorcycle, and I've ridden one since I was 8 years old, and it's a horrible thing to do.
Should have heard the rest of the board's response to this one.
Did we talk about that one at this committee?
That's the first one. It's the first time I've seen it.
Okay, so quickly, that proposes to let motorcycles ride between lanes, between traffic, and on shoulders.
They do it in California. It's legal.
Yeah, so some of you may have experienced that if you've ever driven in California. It's really startling.
They do it in Thailand, too.
Yeah.
Well, they do it in Korea, but it's not illegal. It's just they just do it. But
They do it in Denver, too.
with the size of the motorcycles today, if someone was to say, yes, you could use the shoulder and block traffic, I'd understand that. But to split lanes with a motorcycle as large as mine and as large as my neighbor's car almost, so it makes no sense to allow me to do that. And I would have permission to do it as long as that law got passed.
Well, and staff's primary concern is that we have a very high rate already of motorcycle accidents and fatalities, and this is certainly not going to help that.
The wildfire mitigation was tabled, wasn't it?
This one, yes, the wildfire mitigation income tax credit did die pretty quickly because it has a very large fiscal note attached, and the impact on the state budget was pretty significant. So I think we'll probably see this one again in a different form because there was a lot of support for the concept of trying to figure out ways to lessen the cost and provide an incentive for people to do that kind of work themselves on their own properties. But the bill was just too big in this particular proposal. So that's a quick summary of the ones that we have formal positions on. Any others that you have questions about or want to talk about? I've stunned you all into silence.
How about rainwater harvesting?
This first one here.
Residential precipitation collection.
Rain barrel.
Yes, rain barrels in common parlance.
Awesome.
That one was introduced by a local guy, Merrifield, and it died last year, largely due to concerns by downstream water users that what they view as large-scale water harvesting would damage their water rights.
I understand it's still pretty active this year, though.
It is.
Okay.
There were some changes from last year. Let me just pull it up.
Is it legal to collect a rain barrel? No.
It is not legal to have a rain barrel.
But they sell them.
Yeah, I thought
What's
so.
that?
It
They
was.
sell them in Woodland Park, because I bought
That's
two
right.
the other day, and I didn't even know it was illegal.
Well, it's kind of like fireworks that way, I suppose.
Okay.
Up go.
They have a note that says you can't collect rain in them.
Oh, so it's a pee barrel. I can pee in the barrel, but I
For
can't.
decorative purposes only.
You're supposed to put flowers in it.
Can't, the way they're made, they're sealed.
So this one has some pretty good provisions. It says, that this is for residential use. You can have two of them. You can't exceed a certain capacity. And there's some other kind of safeguards in there. Now, last year, there was an amendment that was put in that would require water providers to come up with, I'm trying to remember the term. It's basically a plan that replaces water that is used upstream. And so that's in this year's version. So as you can imagine, then that has gained some opposition from people like Springs Utilities, who are going to have a hard time coming up with a plan to replace an unspecified number of rain barrels that are collecting 50 gallons if they're full.
Yeah, 250s, 110. The thing is that if you live with an area where you have a well, you can get a permit to have rain barrels. So you're allowed to do that, but you have to have a permit. You can collect it. You can only use it for the same use that you would use for the domestic well. So I don't know, wash dishes and other kinds of things like that. You can't use it, for watering animals or, irrigation, things like that. But you can do that if you have a well. So I think that's, the doors opened up. It was opened up in, I think, 2009 when that bill was, and now they're trying to do the rain barrels for everybody. And I think we're the only state that doesn't allow rain barrels.
There's,
only state.
no, there's one,
We are
one,
the only state.
Hawaii does not allow it, and I think there's one other, but I don't remember which one.
Okay.
Right.
Talk about the only state that matters.
That's how.
I know that there's an argument between our governor and legislature and others about the excess funds that are collected on taxes. Is that a legislative deal, or is that going through the courts right now on whether there will be a Tabor rebate? They're going to change the way they account for certain things.
Are you referring to the question of the hospital provider fee?
Yes, that one.
Yes. So that's a proposal that the governor has put forward that would reclassify money that comes into the state budget that some people view as a fee. And under Tabor, if something is a fee, then it doesn't go to the Tabor cap. There are a number of legislators, though, including Bill Cadman, who think that that's an end run around Tabor, and there are conflicting legal opinions. Each side has a legal opinion supporting their position. And so, there's a lot of discussion going on about that. And
Is there anything legislatively?
there would be a bill that would be introduced, and that hasn't happened yet.
Okay.
There was a bill introduced last session on this topic. It was introduced in the last, I think, 2 weeks of the session, and it just died really quickly.
Incidentally, this says review and approve. That isn't.
That is an error. I apologize. I have nothing for you to approve, just the review part.
We approve what you're doing.
Well, thank you.
Okay, let's try and, any further questions for Rachel? Okay, one of the things that I did bring up as a matter of interest was an article that I'd read about hydrocarbons, and I guess it was in the New Yorker magazine. Well, I thought it was ironic, probably all did too, to read about the fluorocarbon issue in fountains. So, Rachel, do you have information on this?
Yes, Pete, our new environmental program manager, was going to speak to that, so I'm just going to go get him.
Okay, thank you.
Down here.
And next month, while she is gathering Peter, Kevin will be running our meeting next month. I'll be in Vietnam, and
They can't keep anybody.
Cool.
Jim is in Virginia, so
It's
you're up,
Kevin.
man.
So if we don't have a quorum,
Yeah.
I don't know why.
Where?
So are there any other items that you all would like to have on the next CAC meeting?
She says, we had a guy,
Anything special?
he
We
just
had talked about having a communication by
and
the
then after he
joint
came.
land use.
Yes,
And I said,
and
well,
Rachel and I talked about that. We were actually supposed to have it this
the
month.
reason why I live-
And
live-
since I did express to the board that we were interested in this, they are going to have it, and I think it's going to be next month.
What's that?
but it
The
was-
Joint Land Use Study Committee?
with Green Mountain Farms, I would've kept
I
it.
read someplace where Scott is part of the military committee on the Joint Land Use Program. Scott Turner, he was appointed to that by somebody somehow. What?
That's not, I have seen something to that effect, but I'm not sure if it's in that,
Rachel may know.
Rachel might know.
Yeah.
Rachel, there was a question about Scott Walker's role with the joint land use?
Scott Turner.
Scott Turner, I'm sorry. Is he a member?
Not that I'm aware of.
I thought maybe he was representing the CAC on the Joint Land Use Committee.
No,
Okay.
no, we'd have to, I think that'd be a recommendation that comes out of the entire group.
But are you guys aware of this program?
No,
What, the joint
That
land?
is-
joint
Scott,
land
the-
use, yes.
Yeah, okay.
Turner Smith is representing the board of directors. Is that the Turner you're thinking of?
No, Scott.
Okay.
Good, Peter, please.
Yes, how can I help you? Open for business.
We brought up last month, I had a group that I hike with actually said to me, have you seen the article? Because they know I serve on this committee.
Yes.
About water quality, about Colorado Springs was listed as one of the top, I don't know what the right word is, I'm not going to get us in trouble. So we were listed as having a high number of hydrocarbons in a particular water supply.
Okay.
And so I asked Rachel if she could get us some more information on that. And I thought it was ironic yesterday that I did see an article that has to do with Fountain Creek about
Yes.
fluorocarbon issues. So if you could just tell us what's going on, that would be really helpful.
With respect to that particular issue? I know nothing more about that that's in the newspaper, that CDPHE has been monitoring that, and they've come up with some hits, and they're looking into it. I really have no further information at the present time on that issue.
What about the article that was in the paper, or that was in the New Yorker magazine about Colorado Springs?
Okay. There's kind of a general article. What kind of specific questions do you have? Was this a question about fracking and oil development, for example, or something else?
Why were we listed?
Why were we even mentioned?
This is the New Yorker. I don't know.
Does this have to do with Schleg way back when and,
You know, I know a little bit about that. I represent a water district here I'm a district manager for a water district. That is not, it's not related to Schleg. The Schleg contamination is completely different. This is some kind of chemical that's related to like Teflon and non-stick kind of sources. It's that chemical, and as best as Whitefield and Fountain and Security can tell, they have no clue what the source of that is, and the state's trying to figure out whether they can come up with an idea where the sources are. So that I think is kind of where that issue that was related
And that was
to the
raised
discussion yesterday.
Carpet. They said it's something to
It's
do
used
with.
sometimes in carpet cleaning. and
Scotch guard.
Scotch guard kind of stuff, right?
And
But-
I guess one of the things we keep hearing in Fountain, because we have a community advocate / citizen scientist that she likes to refer to herself. She has affiliated that with fracking that's happened 300 miles away.
Yeah. No.
And trying to tell everybody that the heavy water result from fracking is somehow leaching its way 300 miles down into only 7 wells, only in the Security Water District. And
So I think
And did it in less than 100,000 years.
So the information I have from those district managers is that they really don't know where that's coming from, and they're working diligently to try and figure it out.
They're going to go back, investigate backwards. I
But
understood that.
But they also blend their water to the extent that it's well below, by the time it gets to the tap, it's well below any kind of
Thresholds.
standard that the EPA or anybody else has established.
And we never even knew, actually. The only way Fountain knew that EPA had even sampled and gotten samples above a level that anybody would have considered worth looking at was one of our people who had been in a place where they got the New Yorker, read the article, and called our water manager. EPA never notified us of anything, CDPHE never notified us of anything. We found out from a citizen who had read the article while he was traveling for work.
So I apologize, I sent Pete the wrong article. He was prepared to talk to you about fracking, and that's not the issue at all.
But you know what? It is another concern that, it wasn't mentioned, Peter, that the EPA didn't say anything to the community. It has to appear in a national magazine, and this was a new, relatively new, I think it was December 2015 that it was mentioned, so.
Yeah, they took
That's-
samples in
So
early
now
2013.
it's ironic that things are making, now that it's in the public eye, and there's an article, it looks like they're going to try and investigate backwards. It's kind of disconcerting that you take somebody out of state to protect you from your own water. So, but there is progress going to be made, at least as far as investigating.
I have a feeling, it's just this, I hesitate to say to communicate feelings, since it's on the record, but I will. That given the national exposure of the water quality issues in Flint, Michigan, that when everybody turns on their tap, there's a heightened sensitivity. Perhaps for good reason. Maybe that's not a bad thing. That's simply an opinion.
It's not a bad thing to ask questions. Thank
Yeah,
you.
we're looking
I
at water
agree.
tower.
Flint, Michigan happening makes you more aware.
I used to repair them from time to time.
Thank you. Forgive us for interrupting your work.
Oh, no.
Okay, so we will get information. Do you want to let us know specifics about who's coming or what's coming with regard to the joint land use study information?
Sure. Our Joint Land Use Study Manager, Angela Essing, will come and give an overview to the CAC. They're having their first policy committee meeting tomorrow, so she wanted to wait until she could give you more information based on that meeting that would be a little more specific. So you can expect her next month to give an overview of the process and maybe an update on what they've done so far. Okay.
Have they identified the people that are going to do the real work? Because the last I saw was a policy overview, and knowing what the composition was, which included the commanders of all of the military bases, they're not going to do the work.
No.
Yes, the policy committee will be pretty high level and set direction. Then there will be a technical committee. That will consist of planning directors and, like you say, Jim, the people who do the work. Then there will also be working groups that will really dig deep into specific issues that are identified, and that will also include a lot of those planners and worker bees.
Well, this is good, though, because things that come up at the meeting, if we're communicating with both Rachel and Jacqueline, as well as if you all want to raise something and take it back to the board, I think it does show that we're making progress on getting the information that we're interested in and what the people that we serve are interested in, so that's great. The more active you stay and the things that you hear and bring them to the committee, it's not a dead end. We'll get more information. Any other member announcements? Okay, then we're meeting next month at, okay.
March 30th.
Is it March 30th? Okay, it'll be March 30th. I'll still be gone. Thanks, have a great month, and if you have any questions about anything, please let us know. We're adjourned. I said, we'd be out of here early to teach. I'm really excited. Hanoi for a week, and then Ho Chi Minh for a week. Yeah, university students, like project management. And then also how to conduct focus groups and analyze the data.
King of the Hill.
Yeah, it's fun. I can't wait. I'm excited.
I know what it says here. Letter.
My wife was there.
Are you really going to talk to all the board or just the chair and the vice chair? Do you have an executive session? Oh, yeah. But I would imagine if you talk to the entire board about all these things, you'd be there all day.
I'll try and get something together. I think I'm just going to let them know the direction that we're headed.
Who's the chair of the board now?
Like 2 or 3 weeks later, I was like, I called him again. I said,
All righty. Thanks, Vince.
after I got off the phone, my wife started laughing. She says, why do you have that strange look? I said, well, I think he's knocked her off. And she's just got her body buried real quick and can't hear her. I know she's been real busy. So.
I didn't get to go. I had to go facilitate a meeting in Ola. But I saw pictures of Sarah music.
That doesn't have anything to do with us.
That was cracking me up, just the picture.
Yeah, if they're, we've had them.
I think she's out of town.
Oh, awesome. Okay, I'm going to go look.
It was live streamed on Facebook. No, you haven't.
Cool.
Trying.
Bye.
Bye, guys. We're live on Chicken Nugget right now. It can't actually be Trump, Sarah.
They did a mock debate and had people impersonate the major candidates. A woman played Trump. She had like a pompadour, and she was doing the face just perfectly. She's saying she's got a moment already.
Thank you, Bob.
I hope she said
For what?
For considering me.
That's great.
It's not a hard process, it's just a tedious, long one
Well, this was long.
in regards to the
So if you
membership.
had,
Pretty normal. We've been longer.
Yes.
Oh, good luck.
I think it went okay.
No, I haven't seen things before for it.
oh, really?
Yeah, and so, and then that one was immediately on, also, one of the people that talked to almost immediately went on maternity leave. Now she left altogether, so, it's open again. So I don't know Eileen. I'm not shy, good one. Good one. I'm on the shy side. Get out of here. Better one-on-one than with a large group of 50 people.
Well, the key things.
Okay, so, see, I missed the first meeting. Yes. Yeah, that's
Very frustrating because it wasn't.
Big problem. Thank you.
See ya.
See ya.
No, and it wasn't. No, it's not even on my phone. You want, when you do that,
Thank you very much.
well, I almost spoke up and said, look, we've had this discussion 3 times, it's key, and there's no consensus, nobody has.
Bye, Greg.
And,
Okay. Yeah, see you next month. Take care.
but I couldn't figure out a nice way to say it. It's just that you don't like it. Well, I know, but you know what, one of the things I really value is how do we keep peace is if you acknowledge something they don't know. Okay, so we have done that 2 meetings for this particular issue and 2 meetings for the
Yes.
other issue. I actually agree with them. If we're supposed to be the place that we have regional discussions, then you're charged with identifying regional issues. I'd like to see more of that. Bring it up. But I haven't received any agenda requests, like, hey, I've noticed this and we should talk about it. I agree. I think you need to work on those things, but well, and I think one of the things that I'm really opposed to having survived other groups that have is having standing meetings for no good reason. Amen, sister, thank you.
Oh, yeah. No.
No, but what we do need to do is probably put that in our structure. We need better orientation.
Did the training when I came in.
Yeah.
And it was really, really helpful.
Oh, good.
Yeah, so I'm assuming you have the materials or something.
I found some notes.
Okay.
Maybe I should have you look at them and see if
Yeah, I can go through and find
They
my
cover
notes in
everything.
my stack down here at the bottom for this video.
So the biggest thing is we do need to have some orientation and
We
education
do,
because it's
absolutely.
too.
It's too foreign when you walk in the door.
It's very
out.
foreign, because especially for those of us who are not used to dealing in specific transcription. I was concerned about, the patients. I think this thing, not Metro, was cutting roots. And,
Oh, yeah.
And one of the things I saw was our patients, when I was on this, I was a board chair, this center, I said, let me go find out who does this, and that kind of stuff. So that was my initial interest, that and the military piece. Because they had being a military widow, and then has been in the military, but it's like, I am interested in what our response is. And I'm sure those people get to work or not. Miserable. So, you know what, and, so it's there, it's just, I think it's evolved a little bit, and if we have a specific program on how people get trained, then there's a basic level of knowledge.
Yeah, some sort of orientation is definitely helpful.
It was, and I heard,
I
what
think
was it?
there's room for improvement. Because we've heard this from board members too. I didn't know how to plug in here when I was going to the board. Like you guys said. I mean, I felt the same way. But I'm here
Well, at least you're
a lot more
getting paid for
time
it.
than you. Yeah.
We're just trying to
But
do
I
this on a
think-
volunteer basis and go, huh?
Well, I think, and I don't know how many people are in their second term, I have to look back at that thing, because we'll get new people, and when those new
over the top.
But I guess I don't think they're going to skew it one way or the other.
Right.
First of all, they don't want to be called out when they don't know anything.
Oh, I did. The first meeting I was at, we were talking about the downtown, something, what is the new name for the bus depot?
Oh, the
Transit.
yeah,
Trans-
the
whatever.
study.
It
Yeah.
didn't make any sense. I'm like, what is that?
Good for you.
And they're like, oh, it's this. I'm like, oh, can I just call it the bus depot? Okay, now I know what it is.
Transfer station.
Transfer station.
Yeah.
I'm like, the downtown transfer station. I'm like, the downtown transfer station. Exactly.
But it does. I
Yeah,
think that's
it
something
is.
we need to do, and I'm not sure what the right process for getting that done is, Rachel. But
Without
to
putting a
ensure-
lot of burden on the staff, too.
Right.
But, you know, if the board's
But it's
asked
an
for it.
appropriate burden, yeah, and it's something that's going to be applicable to a number of different people, and we use it over and
Absolutely.
over.
Mhm.
Yep.
So that, yeah, I think that's very appropriate.
Well, you know what, you might want to bring up a game plan, because it came up in this meeting, that how do we integrate training and education orientation into our process? And so it's something that new people can expect. So I'll just count on you to go, okay, how to, and I think if you want other people from the committee to help out, we're happy to do that.
She's never going to speak to me.
Well, we should, I'll bring it here and we'll, I'll do it.
Teasing.
Nobody can give it, well, I have to. You were giving me the eyes at one point during our meeting, and I did them back, and then he turned, and I was like, I don't know if you caught me or not. Oh, no.
Hopefully not. I was trying.
Bad influence.
I was trying not to do it because I'm like, really? You know, we've already been over this ground. How many more times are we going to bring it?
Jen, you're doing a great job of facilitation and.
Oh, thanks. Thanks.
I guess my only comment.
You're diplomatic.
There are
right?
times to shut people down. You are very diplomatic, and you're good at it. My patience is like waiting long minutes. But seriously, there are times, because I think other people in the community are like, okay, this is going on and on. Can we just, there are times to say, we're done.
There is, I'm cautious about doing that when we have people in the room.
Right. That is my only observation.
Well, I do, I'm down there.
Watch it.
I told Jim we'll be out early, and he goes,
Exactly.
Michelle, though, it was a level of irony that the whole reason that we were gonna discuss this is because you wanted to nominate. It's true. And I went, when you looked at it, and you know, I'm looking at it going, shh. You know, so.
Well, and in further irony, we overhear this discussion, we think that we may have a title